And just as I was leaving, he says, Mr. Cugno, I'd like to mention something. I said, sure, what's that? He goes, I feel very apprehensive about this transaction. And I go, really? I go, what is it exactly? And he goes, I can't put my finger on it, but I just feel like something's wrong. And I go, huh. I go, well, I'm sure it'll come to you. And I turn around, I just walk right out of the bank. Listen, that dude, about a week later, I know the Secret Service showed up. Hey, this is Matt Cox, and I'm kind of going over basically piece by piece, going over my story and telling it in a chronological order. And so here's where I'm at. We wrote a letter. I wrote a letter to my ex-wife regarding, just basically to my ex-wife and to my son. I wrote a letter to my mother and father. And this becomes important later because I addressed the letter to George and Margaret Cox, which is my mother and father, and I'd signed it, Matt. So, and I just basically the letter, I don't know if did I mention that the letter I just basically just said, explained to them what happened and what was going on and that I was not sticking around to go to federal prison. And that just wasn't something I was interested in doing. I intended to run. I mean, I'm too cute to go to federal prison, and the only things I knew about federal prison was I'd watched a movie called Shawshank Redemption, and I'd watched a movie called The Animal Factory, and all the movies I'd seen on just prisons in general. Not a good situation. I'm not a big guy. I'm 5'6", I weigh 160, 170 pounds. I'm too cute to go to prison. It's not gonna end up well for me, and I know that. So we're on our way to Atlanta, and we get there, and we had no credentials. Like I had I had some IDs. I had some IDs, but they were fake IDs that I basically had created myself. So very quickly, we rent an apartment, and we moved out of that apartment and moved into, first we stayed in hotels for a week. Then we rented an apartment using a fake ID, and I had no credit, but I was able to show that I had 4 or 5 years worth of rental history and of employment, and I had several years of rental history. And even though I had no real credit, I did have an ID, and so I simply had to put down double the security deposit. And we rented a place in Midtown in Atlanta. So it was right on Peachtree. And so we rented this apartment, and immediately we went within days. This was in, I don't know if I mentioned this. This was in early December 2003. So we immediately go to. I didn't want to get a driver's license in Georgia because in Georgia they take your fingerprints, and although I knew they didn't run them, they keep them on file. I just didn't want it. I just didn't want to give them my fingerprints. So we went to Alabama, and I had stolen the information of a guy by the name of Scott. So I'd taken this guy Scott's information, who I'd done a loan for. He was actually an account executive that I'd worked for, and I had kind of tricked him into telling me what his mother's maiden name was and where he was born. And I'd ordered his birth certificate, and I had a copy of his social security card. And so I went to Alabama, and I made a fake lease for an apartment in Alabama, which was actually a UPS box. So I went into the DMV in Atlanta, and I got them to issue me a driver's license in his name. So it's Scott, but it's my picture, and it's a valid driver's license. I then went back to Atlanta, and then we rented a house. Because the whole purpose of going to Atlanta was to try and get some money. I mean, I had like $80,000 in cash, and we had a bunch of stuff, but we didn't have jobs, and we couldn't live the way we were living. We wouldn't last very long in Atlanta on $80,000. Hey, I hope you're enjoying the video. If you're interested in getting a painting done by me, my contact information is in the description box. enjoy the video. So I rented a house from a guy by the name of Michael in Alpharetta, Georgia, which is just outside of Atlanta. It's just like kind of like a suburb. So I rent this house. The house is worth about $190,000, $200,000. And this is like almost 20 years ago. And, I don't know what that house would be worth now. Probably, whatever, $300,000, $400,000 at least. So we rent this house. And I go downtown to Fulton County, which is the county that holds public records for Alpharetta. I go downtown and I end up checking the real estate public records, and I see that Michael owns the property. Well, Mike had 2 mortgages from Bank of America on that property. And so what I did was I prepared a satisfaction of lien or mortgage. It's the same thing. Satisfaction of mortgage for his first mortgage that he had on his house and his second mortgage, because he had a first and a second mortgage. So I prepared a lien on, or a satisfaction of lien or mortgage on those, and I typed it out and printed it out and signed it. I ordered a notary stamp, went and picked up a notary stamp. So I had a notary stamp. I signed the witnesses and signed from whoever was, supposedly from Bank of America that had satisfied. I just made up some name. And then I recorded it. The reason I didn't transfer the property into somebody else's name is because public records was so far behind in Fulton County. It was actually like 10 to 12 weeks behind. So once I recorded that document, it was going to take almost 3 months before it showed up in the system. So I would have first had to have recorded that. Then I would have had to transfer the title into somebody else's name. I mean, it would have just been a real issue. It was easier for me to simply make a fake ID that I used a child's social security number, and I created kind of like what's called it's like a synthetic identity. It's kind of like a shadow. How do I explain this? It's like a separate credit profile for a real person. So I used some of his information, but I used his part of his name. I changed it slightly. And then I didn't use his date of birth, and I didn't use a lot of his pertinent information. So it created a completely different synthetic identity, but I was still able to use the driver's license or the fake ID that I'd made. And then basically I opened up a few bank accounts in his name. I opened up a few corporate accounts. We opened up a corporation. We opened up some corporate accounts. We then opened up some accounts in the name of Scott. Becky, I ended up getting Becky another fake driver's or fake identity. She opened up a few bank accounts in her name, and we basically just had to sit back and wait. We had to wait about 3 months for all of this to take for that whole scam to mature, and for the new satisfaction of mortgages to get recorded in public record. The thing is like. Sitting around waiting was a problem, because then we ended up burning even more money. Now we ended up, Becky, by this point I realized Becky's got some mental problems. I didn't really know her when we took off on the run. And I realized right away she's bipolar. She has bipolar condition. She didn't really know it. Like, she knew something was wrong. At this point she told me, we had been talking, and she'd explained to me that she'd been divorced several times, and that several guys that she had dated had just left her. Like in the middle, like she would come home. She said, I like on a couple occasions she'd been living with someone, came home, and when she came home, the guy was gone. Like the guy had cleaned out the apartment and just left. And, she was like, I was like, wow, you sounds like you've dated some real jerks. And she's like, I know, right? But the truth is like, she's been divorced 3 times. She's had multiple guys just leave her. And all the divorces, the guys just like left. Like they just took off. And it was like, that's weird that they would just that's the cycle with you, is that you date some guy and then he just takes off on you. And that's strange. But, after looking at it, it really wasn't that strange. Like after dating her, I started realizing she put me in a fight or flight mode constantly during these fights. Like she would get so erratic, and these arguments would get so, hyped up, where she was just screaming and hollering, and like she'd get to the point where you think the cops are going to get called, or you think she's going to physically attack you. And all I wanted to do was leave. Like, I don't want to hurt her. I don't want to get into a physical confrontation with her. I just want to leave. And she was blaming me for everything. I mean, everything was my fault. I'd ruined her life. And I'm like, you begged to come with me. You wanted to come with me. I told you what was happening. You knew what was happening. Like, you asked to come with me. Didn't matter. It was my fault. I hate you. And then 10 minutes later, it was, I love you so much. I never want to be without you. You're the most amazing person I've ever met. I'm so lucky to be with you. I mean, it was really insane. And just mentally, she was just so fucked up. Not that I'm the picture of mental health, but compared to her, I was. So we're waiting around. We're doing stuff like we're going on vacations. We're going like we're flying all over the place, and we're going to like where's it, Bermuda? Or we went to Jamaica. We go to Jamaica. Oh yeah, that's the thing. By this point, I had gone online to steal identities. I had placed ads in like the flyer newspapers, which would be like the equivalent would be. What is it now? You go online. You put these. Like the free publications that you can put stuff for sale. Wow. Yellow Pages or something? Gee, like now you're telling me if you want to sell your house, where would you put? If you want to sell something, you would put, or if you want to buy something, you would put it at, it's Craigslist. Oh. Jesus. So it would be like you put a job out. I put something out on Craigslist, let's say, but it was called the flyer. They don't think they have the flyer anymore. I would run an ad in the flyer, and I'd pay a couple $100, and it would run a little ad that would say, good credit, bad credit, no problem. So good credit, bad credit, no problem. Free loan applications, call now. And it'd have my phone number. So then I'd run this ad, and I'd get like 50, 60 calls a day. So I'm answering the phone, and I was calling it like United Capital Mortgage or something. I forget. United Capital Mortgage, how may I help you? And they'd say, hey, I'm calling on your ad. I'm thinking about buying a house. And I go, okay, do you want to fill an application out now, or do you want to fill one out? Do you want to do it online? You can do it online. Of course, you can't do it online. I didn't have a website or anything. And they go, they all always said, nah, man, I'll fill it out now. I'll fill it out now. And I'd say, okay, sure. So we take an application. They would say, yeah, bro, problem is, dude, like I got I got bad credit. Like I got some credit, a repo, and I got some bad student loans. And I'd say, bro, don't even worry about it. We got a program for that. I can totally get you in a house. Let's go ahead and take an application. Let's get you sorted out, and let's get you into a house as soon as possible. Definitely can get you a loan. It didn't matter what they said. I was going to tell them we have a program for that. Oh, I just had a foreclosure. They could say I'm in foreclosure. I'd say, bro, don't worry. We got a government program for that. We can totally get that taken care of. Not going to be a problem. I can get you in a house. I'm just trying to get them to give me their information. So they would fill out the application. They'd give me their name, date of birth, everything. And I just ask a couple extra questions, which would be like, where were you born? What county were you born in? They'd say, Hillsborough County. What's your mother's maiden name? They'd say, oh, her name is, Jennifer Smith. Okay. And now I have enough to steal their identity. Like just by telling me their full name, what county they were born in, and their mother's maiden name, I can now, and their date of birth, I can steal your identity. So they would give me their information. I'd say, okay, great. Look, I'm going to go ahead and pull your credit, and I'm going to give you a call back. It'll probably be later today or tomorrow. Then by the end of the day, I would pick out the ones that I liked. Like I like this guy. He's about my age. This woman's about Becky's age. We'd have 4 or 5 different names. And then I'd take all of the paperwork, and I'd call a local mortgage company, and I would say, hey, I have 50, some odd applications. Do you guys want to, I'm with a mortgage company. We only take so many per month. We're at our quota. I'd like to go ahead and give these to you. Just take the applications, pull these people's credit, and call them back. So I'd send over the applications. I'd actually fax them. I don't think people use faxes anymore, but so I would actually, it's like a scanned document, whatever. So I'd fax over all the applications to them. They would then pull these people's credit and call them back. So the people get their credit pulled, and they don't ever think anything's wrong. Like they get a call back from a mortgage company that says, yeah, that the guy that initially you called on and took the application, that's a guy that generates leads for us or whatever, and they call them back, and it totally makes sense to them if they question it at all. I talked to a guy named John on the phone. He took my application. Who are you? Oh, my name's Nancy, and I'm calling you back. With this mortgage company, we pulled your credit and we can get you a loan. Or we can't get you a loan. We pulled your credit and you're horrible. Now it's Nancy's problem to tell them that they can't get a loan. Either way, I have the information that I wanted. So out of like 30, 40, 50 applications, I would cherry pick 5 or 6 people that were close to my age, and I would then order their documents. So I'd go online and I would order their birth certificates and their social security cards, and sometimes I'd register to vote in their name, and then I'd order their high school transcripts. And now I have enough information to steal your identity. I would go to whatever. I'd go to South Carolina, North Carolina, Alabama. There's plenty of states, Florida. Go into the DMV. I'd have to show proof of residency. So I would register to vote in that state, and I'd get a voter's registration card within a couple days. And I'd get the voter's registration card, or I would get a lease agreement. I'd make a fake lease agreement, fill out the lease agreement for some local UPS store, go open up a box at the UPS store in case something gets mailed there for these guys, and I'd get mail there. So on the lease looks like it's an apartment, but it's actually a UPS store, so you can mail stuff there. I would then go into the local DMV, say, hey, my name is, for instance, one of the first identities I did was a guy named Michael Eckert. So I went and I would go in and get a driver's license in the name of, let's say, Michael Eckert's name, and I would give them, like I did this actually, I think in North Carolina, because I relocated at some point later in North Carolina, and went into North Carolina, gave them Michael Eckert's birth certificate, social security card. Now that's my proof of those are my 2 primaries. Then you need a secondary, which is really your social security card also works as your secondary. And then I would give them a voter's registration card, or I would give them a lease agreement proving residency. And they would say, okay, go ahead and wait over here and stand in line. And 30 minutes later or 20 minutes later, they'd call you up and they'd type all the information in. And they have you stand in front of the little background. They take my picture and boom, they give me a driver's license or an ID or whatever. And multiple times I had to take driver's license tests. They make you take the written test. So, which isn't written, it's obviously on a computer. But the point is that I would get that ID. So in Michael Eckert's name, I got Michael Eckert's name. I think I got a passport in his name. So Becky and I had our passports in 2 fake names, and we went to a few different places. One of the places was, I remember, Jamaica. Because going through, because when we came back from Jamaica, I was so flipped out because I was thinking that Becky, because she'd been smoking pot, she smoked dope the whole time we were there. Because she's a big pot fan. So the whole time she was stoned when we were in Jamaica. And I remember on the way back telling her, if you put anything in your fucking luggage, like you're trying to bring anything back, like that's going to be a problem. No. And she kept joking with me that if they asked to look in her luggage, just to run. And I was like, it's not even funny. So I remember going through, we got into an argument waiting in line at customs, and I went to the bathroom, came back, and she'd already gone through the line. So by the time I got there, they were like, "Okay, are you traveling alone?" I said, "No, I'm traveling with this," and I gave her name. I forget, it was It was something else. Anyway, Grace Hudson or something. So I gave her name that she was using, and they were like, "Where is she?" I said, "I don't know. She was in line. I went to the bathroom. Now she's gone." They were like, "So you didn't stay in line with her?" I go, "Well, no, I didn't stay. I went into the bathroom, came back." Like, it was a big issue standing there at customs with this fucking dude. And anyway, he let me through because she had gone she'd already gone through. She was just such a jerk off. All right. So, we're basically doing anything to burn time. We're going mountain climbing. We're going hiking. We're going indoor mountain climbing. We're doing all kinds of stuff. Skydiving. Like, we're just doing anything we can to burn off the time. We went to Disney World for a week. And we drove to Orlando and went to Disney World for a week. I mean, we're just doing anything. We went to New Orleans. No, wait. We didn't go to New Orleans then. You know what we did? We ran another scam, and we went to Tallahassee because public records in Tallahassee was only like a week behind. So I remember we rented a house in Tallahassee from this guy, and it was in his ex-wife's name, and he was helping her out. So we rented the house, and we got 2 loans on the house for like $50,000 a piece. So we're going to get like $100,000, and so Becky goes. And I had originally wanted to do the loan. I was going to transfer the deed out of this woman's name into my name. And Becky was saying, no, it's better off if I just pretend to be her. We'll make a fake ID in her name, and I'll be her. Just satisfy the loan, because that way she's owned it for like 10 years. It looks more reasonable that you're refinancing a house you've owned for 10 years than one that you bought a week or two ago. And that does, but it had never been an issue. But she wanted in on the whole thing. She wanted to like do her part. So I said, okay, no problem. And I was going to do like 3 or 4 loans. But we only needed a little bit of money at the time because we were running low. What we ended up doing was I went and I satisfied the mortgage on this woman's house. This woman had a mortgage and she had like 2 judgments on her. So I satisfied both the judgments and the mortgage because it's the same basic document. So I satisfy all of this stuff on her house, and now Becky owns the house. The woman's name was Teresa Knight. So she owned the house in the name Teresa Knight. I then applied for like 2 or 3 different mortgage with hard money lenders, and they were going to lend her money. So she's going to get I think it was 2. I think it got down to like she was going to borrow 2 different mortgages for like $55,000, $56,000 each mortgage. So she goes to one closing. We go to the closing. She gets the $50,000, and the next day we were going to do the second closing. And on the way home, we got into an argument. I remember in my book, I go over what the argument's about. It's literally, this was the argument. I'm going to explain. This is how fucking insane this chick was. The argument was this: that as we're driving, she goes, "Oh my God, we just made like $56,000," and I think the check was for we borrowed like 60, and she walked away with like, let's say 56, I think. So she's like, "Oh my God, we just made $56,000. That took like less than a month." She says, "That's $56,000. And I went, "Well, yeah, I mean, less expenses." And we're driving, and she goes, "What?" I go, "Well, less expenses. I mean, gas, car payments, driving down here, spending, a couple of hotel nights. Like we stayed in the hotel. That's, food that we could have been eating a whole, like there's expenses. But yeah, it's roughly $56,000. I said, roughly, but less expenses. And she goes, "You're fucking sucking all the fun out of this for me." And I went, "Well, what?" And she goes, "I mean, what? Less expenses?" And I went, "No, I'm not saying we didn't make money. I'm saying, yeah, we made money. I'm saying, but it's not $56,000. It's $56,000 less about $400 or $500 in expenses. So it's, but yeah, you're right. It's about $56,000. And she goes, "You know what? I want to go home. Let's just go. Let's just go back to Atlanta." And I went, "Well, no, we have to close the other loan is tomorrow. It was for like $60,000. I go, "It's like $60,000 tomorrow." And she goes, I said, "We got to close tomorrow." And she goes, "No, I don't want to do it." I go, "Becky, it's $60,000. What do you mean? It's $60,000. And she goes, "Less expenses." And I go, what the fuck does that mean? What the fuck are you saying? I go, it's 60 grand. And she goes, I'm not doing it. It's too risky. I go, whoa. I said, it's not too risky. It's already gone through underwriting. We've already talked to the guys. It's ready to go. We're ready to close. Like they've already sent the money. We just have to go pick it up. And she goes, well, I'm not doing it. I said, well, if I'd known you were going to go tits up on me at the last minute, I said, I'd have just done it myself, which was my original plan. She goes, forget it. Let's just go. We get into this huge argument. But she wouldn't budge. And so we end up driving back to Atlanta and never closed on the second loan. And that's just what a psycho this chick was. So now we've got like $55,000 extra. We've spent probably $30,000 in the last couple months. And she says, I remember she goes, she wanted a boob job. So she's like, well, I want to get a boob job. I'm like, well, why don't we get a boob job with the $60,000 that you left in Tallahassee? Like the money you didn't get. Why are we getting a boob? Why are we paying for plastic surgery for you with the money that you did get, which you left the rest of the money? I mean, why are we still splitting the money? You left your money. And so, we get into this huge argument. She ends up getting a boob job. She got a boob job, liposuction. She got a tummy tuck. She looked amazing. She looked amazing afterwards. Around the same time, I ended up getting a nose job. So I got a nose job. I got two hair transplants. So like they take the hair from the back of your head, they take the follicles and they re-implant them in the front of your head. So, what you could do? You could put up like a picture of my old mug. I'll show you the mug shot where I'm like balding in the front, and then you could take a picture of me now. Well, they know what I look like now. You see the wanted poster? They redo that. Then I got what's called a mini facelift. They go in behind your ears and they suck out all the junk in your neck. And so I did all this stuff. Got rid of my love handles. Got what's called gynecomastia surgery because I used to work out all the time. I had what they call bitch tits, which is gynecomastia. It's like you get a growth in you've seen older guys that have this growth in their chest, right? Like a lump. So they went in, they cut that out. I got some work done. And so now we're still in Atlanta waiting for the satisfaction of mortgages to take place. What did we do in Atlanta? Oh, I know what it was. So while we're still screwing around waiting, once we get the 50 some odd thousand, so now we got we're still only have probably 80 or 90, probably we're still back at like 90,000, maybe 90,000, maybe 100. And I remember we went to New Orleans. So when we go to New Orleans, oh yeah, this is the other thing. Before we even went to before we even went to Tallahassee, to borrow the 60,000, whatever it was. Before we even went there, the St. Petersburg Times came out with an article called Dubious Deals. And this is a newspaper in Tampa. It's now called the Tampa Tribune. Or is it Tampa Times? Tampa Bay Times, I think. So they had come up with an article called Dubious Deals, where this guy, Jeff Testerman, he'd pieced together all of the different synthetic identities, the Reservoir Dogs synthetic identities that I had been using. He pieced all of those together and came up with this article which explains that there's this guy, Matt Cox, who's currently on federal probation. He drove up the prices on all in this area. He borrowed a bunch of money. Like he's quoting law enforcement. He blows the whole thing wide open. So every couple of days, a new article's coming out because now people are talking. Law enforcement's talking. They're looking for me. I'm wanted. I'm now on the run. Like there's all these articles that start coming out. And then we just went to Tallahassee and just stole some more money. And now we're in Atlanta. Well, while we're in Atlanta, these articles are coming out. There's an article. There was a whole series around the same time in the first 6 months to a year that we're gone. A whole series of articles that came out in the Chicago Tribune called The Fugitives. Well, we ended up going to New Orleans, and while we were in New Orleans, we just for like a week or two, I remember we were in New Orleans. We went on a bunch of ghost tours. We hung out. This was before Katrina. We hung out, went on some ghost tours, rode the trolleys, went to some bars, did the whole New Orleans thing, went to a bunch of museums. Turns out that there's an artist by the name of Matthew Cox. Hey, I hope you're enjoying the video. Wanted to let you guys know one of the ways I pay for all of this is through Patreon subscriptions. So if you join my Patreon at the top tier, you get a different painting every single month. The contact information for Patreon is in the description box. Back to the video. The U.S. Marshals had gotten a tip that there was an artist named Matthew Cox that was having an exhibit in New Orleans. We stayed on Royal Street, right? Because there's Bourbon Street, Royal Street. There's like one street over. Like literally about 2 to 3 blocks from where we stayed was a gallery, an art gallery that was having an exhibit, like a 2 or 3 week long exhibit for an artist named Matthew Cox. While we're in New Orleans, the U.S. Marshals sent 2 U.S. Marshals to the gallery to show the gallery owner a photograph of me, my wanted poster. And he said, no, that's not Matthew Cox. That's not the Matthew Cox that I own. I mean, just completely by coincidence, this is what happened. I found this out 5 or 6 years later when I ordered the Freedom of Information Act. Got the U.S. Marshal report that explains that they flew out there, went there, the whole Matthew Cox thing. So I thought that was hilarious or interesting because, I mean, for all I know, we passed right by these guys. They were a couple blocks away. We were all over that area going to museums and bars and just hanging out. So what ended up happening was we go back to Atlanta. By this point, we now have the satisfaction of loans that I had created had now shown up in public record. So now I own that house in Atlanta in the name Michael Shanahan. I own his house. Free and clear. And I have a driver's license in his name. I have multiple bank accounts in his name. By this point, I have credit cards in his name. I have a social security number in his name, not with his social on it, but the social of a kid. So I have a social security number in his name. So I have everything I need that I need to close on his house. I then get 3 hard money. I call 3 hard money lenders in the area. Just go online and I look them up and find 3 guys. One comes out at, let's say, 10 o'clock in the morning, looks at the house and says, well, Michael, yeah, this is a nice house. This is worth about $190,000, $200,000. I'll lend you $150,000 on it. I go, okay, great. We schedule a closing at his title company. Around 2 o'clock, another guy shows up, walks around the house, says, yeah, nice house. This is a nice house. It's worth about $190,000, $200,000. I'll lend you $150,000 on it. I said, great. We schedule a closing to close at his title company. Third guy comes out, whatever, around 4 or 5 o'clock that day, looks at the house. Everything's great. He's going to lend me $150,000 on it. Schedule another closing. So within a week, now they all send an abstractor down to public records. They look at the title, and the title is in the name. The deed is in the name, Mike. I have an ID, and it's Michael. I'm in the house. He sees me living in the house. I don't live in the house. I tell him I don't live in the house. I mean, I tell him it's a rental. I'm going to do repairs, put hardwood floors in, put a pool in, put a new roof on. I'm going to do an addition. Tell him I'm going to do all this stuff. Tell him it's a rental property because I can't say I live in the house because if you go in the house, there's nothing in the house except for some bedroom furniture what we're using. I didn't furnish the entire house because it doesn't look right. I mean, because first of all, I'm not going to blow $30,000 on new furniture for a place that I'm going to abandon in a month. So all of these guys are ready to lend me money on this house. And I'd say a week later, by this point, they've called my employer, which is a telephone number that goes to Becky. So Becky's answering. They might have asked for W-2s and pay stubs. I doubt it. They were hard money lenders. They typically don't. They'd pulled my credit. I have a couple credit cards that showed up, but there's no real credit. It's brand new credit. And if they asked, hey, what's with this credit? Like you only have a couple credit cards that have only been open for a month or two. I'd tell them, well, I'm out of bankruptcy like 10 years ago and I haven't really reestablished credit. And I'm just now trying to reestablish credit. And they go, oh, okay, that makes sense. And it does make sense. So we schedule the closings and I go to the title companies and I close. Let's say I close one on one on a Monday, one on a Tuesday, and then another one on a whatever, Wednesday or Thursday. Not that I couldn't close them all the same day. I just saying that within the same day or a few days, I close them all about the same time. I get the checks issued to me. I then turn around and I go deposit all the checks into different bank accounts. Well, what I usually did was, instead of having them give me a check for $150,000, what I would typically do is I would say, I go to the title company. I'd say, hey, listen, I owe some some contractors, and I owe different people some money. Can you take my $150,000 check? Can you break it apart and give me one check for $29,000 to this guy, one check for $7,000 to this guy, one check for $14,000 to this guy? So I would ask them to break up the checks, and that's what I typically did. So usually they would do that. They wouldn't have a problem with that. I remember this one title company, they had an issue with that. They were like, oh, we don't know. That's against policy. So they just gave me the check. So I went to their bank and I asked their bank, can you break up this check into different cashier's checks? And I remember the woman gave me a hard time. Like, this is something like I didn't put in the book, but I remember she was like, I'm sorry, that's against policy. We don't do that. I went, okay, well, I remember going, well, the check is good, right? She goes, yeah, it's good, but we don't break up checks into cashier's checks. Like, you don't have a bank account here. And I was like, okay, well, but the check is good. Right. I said, so if I came in here with cash and asked you to if I asked you to buy a cashier's check or a cashier's check with cash and I didn't have a bank account, would you then give it to me? She was like, if you came in with like $2,000 and wanted a cashier's check? I said, yeah. She goes, yeah, we would do that. I said, so what's the difference? This is a check to your bank that you're saying is good. And she was like, I'm sorry, it's just not policy. We just don't do that. I went, but if I wanted to cash this check, you would have to cash it. And she looked at me and she went, well, I mean, it's $150,000. And I was like, right, but you still have to cash it. She goes, well, we couldn't cash it at this branch. You'd have to go to a cash transaction branch. And I said, great, can you set that up? And she went, well, why don't you just deposit? I said, I don't want to deposit. I want cash. Or I want the cashier's checks. I want one or the other. She goes, well, we can't do that here. We have to schedule it. I said, well, then schedule it. And she goes, well, I would have to call down there. I said, so call. And she went, are you serious? I said, yes, ma'am, I'm serious. And she goes, okay, well, I'll schedule it. When do you want it? I said, tomorrow. She goes, I'll schedule it for tomorrow. You can go get cash tomorrow. I said, great. Tell them I'm going to want it in nickels, dimes, and quarters. And she looked at me and she goes, you must be joking. I said, no, ma'am. I said, and when they ask, why are we counting $150,000 in nickels, dimes, and quarters? You can tell them about your strict adherence to policy for not cutting this up into cashier's checks. And she just looked at me. I said, or you can just give me the cashier's checks. Because I said, well, I'm getting one or the other. And she looked at me and she went, what were the names you want the cashier's checks in? And I said, okay. So I gave her like the name Scott Cugno. I want a check for Scott Cugno in the name and for $29,000. I want another check cut to this guy, to this girl, to this guy. And these were all names of people I had IDs in. So she cuts up these checks, and so Becky and I spend the next week going around cashing these checks and depositing them. So we deposit some of the checks, we cash some of the checks. So at this point, I'm acting as Michael. Well, I have a check in the name Scott, and I have a real ID in Scott's name for $29,000. So I instead of depositing it in his bank account, I remember Becky and we went to the bank, and I walk in the bank and I said, hey, look, I need to cash this. And the guy goes, the cashier looked at it and she goes, well, it's $29,000. And I went, right. And she said, I mean, why don't you just deposit it? And I said, I don't have a bank account here. I have a bank account in Florida, in a small local bank in Florida. I don't feel like, back then they would hold your checks for like 10 days in out-of-state banks. And I was like, I don't feel like having it held. I just want the cash. And she goes, well, you're going to have to talk to the manager. So I go, okay. So I walk over and I sit in the manager's office, and it's a little glass cubicle. You could see the whole bank. I said, okay, no problem. So I go and I sit there, and he comes over and he says, okay, why don't you just deposit in your bank? And I explained to him why. And then he goes, okay, well, we have to look into this. And I said, that's fine. And he goes, can I have your driver's license and 2 forms of ID? Sure. I give him my driver's license, and I give him a credit card in the name for Scott Cugno. It was a debit card. So I give him a debit card, so it says Visa, and I give it to him. He walks in the back, to check it out. And I remember my phone rang. So my phone rings, right? And I look at my phone, and it's a phone number that I don't recognize. No, wait. The first phone number I looked at. So I look at my phone, and it's Becky. She's sitting in the car. And I look at the phone, and I go, huh. So I pick it up, and I go, yeah, what's up? And she said, what's taking so long? I go, I don't know, the guy's being an asshole. He won't give me the money. He's running a check right now on the whole thing. And she goes, oh, my God, get out of the bank. Get out of the bank. And I go, no, I'm not going to get out of the bank. I just have to wait. I have to run it. She said, run a check. Like the check is good. The check is good. My ID is good. Everything's real. So I just have to wait. She goes, oh my God, I'm so nervous. I go, calm down. And I said, look, if the cops show up, call me and I'll run out of the bank and you can meet me behind the Publix, like in the same shopping plaza. She's like, all right, hang up the phone. A couple minutes later, the guy comes back and he goes, I have a question for you. So why do you want cash? And I went, why do I want cash? I said, I want cash because I work for a construction company and we cash guys' payroll checks. And so I'd like to have the cash on hand to cash their payroll checks. And he went, okay, that makes sense. And he walks off. Phone rings again. It's Becky. She's screaming and hollering. A couple minutes later, the guy comes back and he goes, I have a question. He said, who gave you this check? I go, the guy's name is Michael. And he goes, why did he give you the check? And none of this is his business, by the way. So I was like, but they weren't hard questions, and a normal person would just answer the questions. They wouldn't get pissy with them. They would just be like, oh, well, this. So he goes, why did he give you the check? And I went, my construction company that I work for, we're doing an addition for him, and he owes us this money on a draw. And he says, okay. And you own the construction company? I said, I own part of the construction company. He goes, okay. He goes, yeah, that makes sense. And he gets up and he walks away. So then my phone rings again. Becky's screaming and hollering, get out of the bank, get out of the bank. I said, is the cops here or something? She's like, no, I feel nervous. You got to leave. I said, I can't leave. I can't leave the bank. If I leave the bank, I'm walking away with he's got a check for $29,000, my ID, and my Visa, my debit Visa. I can't leave. They'll call the cops for sure. I have to play it out. So I hang up on her. A couple minutes later, he comes back. He asks another question. He leaves. And my phone rang again. Only this time, my phone rings, and I don't recognize the number. So I go, huh. So I pick up the phone. No big deal. I pick up the phone. I go, hello? And this woman says, hi, is this Michael? And I go, yes, because I'd used the same phone number for most of these guys. So although I'm in the bank as Scott, the phone number it could be Scott's phone, it could be Michael's. So I go, yes, who? I go, who's this? She goes, this is Kimberly from SunTrust Bank, South Trust. I don't know. She says, this is Kimberly from SunTrust Bank. We have someone in the bank by the name of Scott trying to cash a check. We're just calling to verify that the funds that you had initially issued the check and that it was okay to cash the check. And I went, yeah. She goes, can you verify the amount? I said, yeah, I believe it was for $29,000 even. And she goes, oh, okay. That's all we need to verify. Thank you. So it's good. I said, yes, it's good. Scott, I issued it to Scott Cugno. It's fine. She goes, oh, okay. That's fine. Thank you. So go to hang up the phone. I said, how did you get this phone number? And she says, oh, I got the phone number because we called the title company where the check was originally issued from, and they gave us your phone number. If they had called information or anybody, they could have gotten the real Scott, the real Mike, but they didn't. They happened to call the title company who gave them my number. So I just got lucky. So I hang up the phone. I wait, and a couple minutes later, still took this guy 5 minutes. The bank manager comes over with this woman and says, Mr. Cugno, we're going to go ahead and cash the check. And they count out $29,000. He counts it out twice. And then when I'm done, when he's done, I scoop up the money, put it in an envelope, put it in my pocket, stand up. And just as I was leaving, he says, Mr. Cugno, I'd like to mention something. I said, sure, what's that? He goes, I feel very apprehensive about this transaction. And I go, really? I go, what is it exactly? And he goes, I can't put my finger on it, but I just feel like something's wrong. And I go, huh. I go, well, I'm sure it'll come to you. And I turn around, I just walk right out of the bank. Listen, that dude, about a week later, I know the Secret Service showed up and said, did you cash a check for $29,000 from this fucking guy right here? Like, completely not the guy. So I remember I got back into the car and I closed the door. And I was like, oh my God. And I'm laughing. I go, they just cashed a check for $29,000. They this. And I told her about the phone call. I told her the whole thing. She's like, you got so lucky. Well, there used to be a program called Masterminds. So it was like a true crime program about guys that they would say were like master criminals. And I closed the door and I'm sorry. And so I'm like, oh my God, you can't believe this. Boom, boom. And she's like, what? Oh my gosh. She goes, you got so lucky. I said, listen, when they do the episode of Masterminds on me, I said, that's going to be in the episode. And she goes, oh my God. She just started laughing. We backed out and drove off. And that was the only check I ever cashed for more than basically $10,000 because that was what, there's something called a cash transaction report they have to fill out or a suspicious activity report. That is the only time I ever got a CTR filed on me, and I got a suspicious activity filed on me. Out of all the millions of dollars of checks that I cashed, that's the only time I ever got a cash transaction report and a suspicious activity report filed on me is because of that one thing. But I drove off. We cashed $400,000 worth of checks in the over the next week or so, just depositing them, cashing them, depositing them, cashing them. Sometimes they would go. Sometimes the bank would get like I would be cashing what we would deposit a check into one of the IDs for that Becky had, and I would go in and cash a check for like $8,000, and then they would call her. Like they go, oh, hold on a second. They'd walk in the back and call her and be like, listen, some guy's here trying to cash a check for $9,000. And she has a new account. It's only been open 3 or 4 months. So they would say, he's trying to cash a check for $9,000. Here's his name. Did you write this check? And she'd go, yeah, I wrote the check. That's fine. That's so-and-so. I wrote him the check. They go, oh, okay. She'd be sitting in the car verifying that she'd written the check. They'd cash the check and I'd leave. That was happening every single day for a week or two. At the end of that scam, we'd pulled out $450,000. I'd say about $450,000. And at that point, we had built up some additional identities and started we'd set up like a safe house in Charlotte, North Carolina at this point. And so we had a whole life kind of set up, like we had an apartment rented. We had furniture bought. Like we had this furnished apartment completely in this, right downtown Charlotte, like on I forget what floor it was, whatever, 10th, 11th floor or something, I forget. But I mean, it was a real nice condo downtown. It was an apartment building at the time, and they turned it into condos, but super nice, right downtown, beautiful place. God, that thing had to be 1,500 square feet, 2-bedroom, 2-bath. Concrete floors, stainless steel appliances. I mean, just a place, high ceilings. It was great. So we had set this whole thing up, and we're still in Alpharetta, Georgia, basically Atlanta, Georgia, cashing checks. And we have a little over 400,000, probably close to 500,000 at this point. 450, 500,000 in cash in a duffel bag, and it's sitting in. I remember it was sitting in the back of the vehicle. We bought by the way, we bought another vehicle. We took the Audi and we dropped the Audi that we had been driving just before we took off. It had been housed in the garage. So just before we took off, we went and we put the Audi in a police station parking lot. So I parked it in a police station parking lot, and I left. We went and got like some lira, and we printed out a brochure for like a hotel in Spain, right? Like some Spanish hotel. And we left the brochure wedged between the car seats, and we left a couple of lira laying in the back, and then we got a Spanish for Dummies book and stuck it in the trunk with some other just random junk that you would leave in a car you're abandoning, right? So we just left some random bullshit in the car, and and then left it in the police station parking lot where they're going to find it. They're already looking for this car. Then we had another car we bought in the name of, what's the name of the guy? That was Michael Eckert. I was Michael Eckert in Charlotte. So we've got a car in the name of Michael Eckert. We had we got like $400,000 or $500,000 in cash in a duffel bag sitting in the back, and we had all the money out, and yeah, that was it. That was it. We abandoned everything. So we abandoned everything, and I'd say about a week or so after we left Atlanta to go to Charlotte, North Carolina to do another scam, at that point, the Secret Service and the FBI showed up at the Alpharetta house and went and contacted the real Mike. Told him that, hey, there's been this scam committed, and these guys just borrowed almost $500,000 on your house, and we took off, and that was it. So that scam was like over. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, hit the bell so you get notified of other videos like this. Leave a comment in the algorithm and share the video and the whole series. And stay tuned, because I'm going to tell you what happened when I got to Charlotte, North Carolina in the name Michael Eckert. See ya.